One. Aloha and welcome back. Today we have the privilege coming to us from Maui to be with Janet Kira Lessin. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you for inviting me, Alfred. I'm glad to be here.
And what we're doing today is really taking a journey with Janet through her multi-dimensional experiences in the same way that the new organization Free is documenting the multidimensional experiences of interdimensional contactees. We're documenting Janet's, and Exopolitics TV has done this with others, such as Ray Kosolanich. And so now, Janet, we're here with you, and we're gonna depend on you to really lead us through this. So why don't we'll start at the beginning. And you can just walk us through. And so, Janet Kira Lessin in Maui, over to you.
Okay, thank you. I am a lifelong experiencer contactee going back to the crib. My experience is probably common to many, but they're not able to acknowledge the experiences because of our social stigma around it. And so I've joined Free, which is an organization which is going to help experiencers come out of the closet. And October 1st of every year is the Experiencers Day to come out of the closet. So this is my birthday. I am 61 years old today, and I'm coming out of the closet on Alfred's show, and I'm so thankful, Alfred, for this opportunity. So most experiencers do not explain what's going on in their lives because they get shame and blame and ridicule from their friends and family. I've lost friends over all this. My mother was very hostile towards me when I started telling her things when I was very young, so I learned to shut up and keep it quiet. But basically, coming into this incarnation, I came in, I didn't have... the filters didn't work. We come through the veil of forgetfulness, and the veil did not work. So I remembered previous incarnations, and I was able to see extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, discarnates, you name it. They were coming into my bedroom at night when I was a child, and I was trying to talk to my mother. I was able to talk at a very advanced level at a very young age, which freaked her out. So let me go to some of the earliest incidents. When I was very young, we're talking about I'm 61, so this is 1954 to 1956. And I remember very clearly, and this is very bizarre, but I'm coming out. This is no holds barred. I was levitating in my crib. And I was zooming around my crib, and I would, zoom around the room. My mother had put my crib in the dining room because I grew up in a farmhouse, Pennsylvania farmhouse from 1840s, and it didn't have very good heat, even in the 60s and 50s. It didn't have very good heat, so she put the crib in the dining room so she could keep an eye on me, and she was in the kitchen washing her clothes, and she had one of those wringer washers, where you had to pull the clothes up and run the wringer. So she's in there washing her clothes, and I'm zooming around, and I'm going back into the crib, and I'm landing, I'm laughing, and then I zoom around again, and I land, and I laugh, and my mother comes in, and she catches me, and I freeze. And I realize from her reaction, that's not normal. You're not supposed to do those things. So I filed that first incident in my folder, thinking, well, that was, as I got older, I said, well, that couldn't have happened. That was too bizarre. Nobody can do that. But I was at the Prophets Conference in 1990. It was probably 97 or 98. And this fellow came up to the speaker to ask questions of the panel, and he said, I just want to relay something. And he said that he had been in an orphanage with a bunch of nuns, and he used to levitate and fly around the orphanage. And he said, I did it all the time until I was about 3 years old, between 2 and 3, and finally they kept punishing me that I just stopped. And he said, if anybody else has experience of levitating, meet me in the back of the conference room after this session. So I told Sasha, my husband, I said, I'm going back there because I remember that, and I've been hiding this all my life. So I went back there. There were 13 people in the back of the room, and they had experiences of levitating as a child. And we're not talking out of body astral projection. We're talking full-on levitation. So that was a big aha to me. So experiencers out there, contact Alfred, contact me. Have you had experience of levitating? So that was very young age. And I was talking at an adult level, and I learned to stifle that. I learned to baby talk. And I can remember all my childhood kind of toning it down. I have to talk baby talk because if you talk beyond your years, you get punished, criticized. It makes the adults very uncomfortable. So I learned that. There was a time when I was about 18 months old. As a child, you're not geared with time, right? So I'm piecing this together kind of based on the time of the year, the weather. So I'm about 18 months old. It's cold, and I'm in my bedroom at night, and I suddenly am surrounded by extraterrestrials, and they're all, they have 2 eyes in the front, all different faces, all different features, just like Star Trek. Some of them are kind of animal looking. Some resemble animals that are not of the earth, but they're all kinds of eyes in front, but at me, and we do what's called a puja. In Tantra, you look at each other's eyes. So we're one after the other. They're coming, they're looking me in the eyes, and it's full telepathic communication. And they've come to say goodbye. And they said, it's time to be human. You've got to just go into the experience. It's time to be human. So at that point, after I saw, I don't know, I'd say it was just like flashes, almost like one partial part of a second after another, just all these images of these all the beads of existence, and they're coming to say goodbye to me. And then finally there's one last one, and we just hold contact in our eyes, and then there was this loud clap like thunder, but it wasn't thunder, it wasn't a storm, it was just like, to me, I think they were closing the gap between the dimensions, and so it was a loud crack. And then I started to scream and cry because there was a pain of being disconnected from the continuum. It was just extremely painful. And my mother came in, and I could normally talk to her, even at 18 months old, but it just came out garbled, like baby talk. And it was like, there's an experience in medical profession where what you're thinking doesn't come out as what you're saying. I forget what that term is called. So I was experiencing something like akin to that. And then that made my mother more comfortable. And so I kind of relaxed more into being a human being. Now, I'm not anything special. I think all of us are multidimensional beings having simultaneous experiences on many levels across the continuum. And that time is a illusion of this 3D reality. And that when we come into physical form, most of us are so focused on this here and now and being human and being who we are, that we lose contact with the continuum, which I think is a good thing, because it's really hard to multiplex on that level and to stay focused on the experience that you're having here and the life that you're leading. So I started to relax into it. But the problem was, since I was able to see beyond this 3D level, different beings would see me seeing them, and they would come and try to get my attention. So I spent a lot of my childhood dealing with ghosts, discarnates, people that had died and were probably traumatized. They were stuck in the bardo. They couldn't get from one realm to the next, and they were seeking help from me. What could I do to help them? I wasn't sure what to do. Most times I would just, try to talk to them. As I got older, it seemed too unreal to be a human child and having to deal with this other level of existence. So I just started pulling my blankets over my head and forgetting about it. I didn't want to deal with it. Now, looking back on it, I don't really know if they were human dead, extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, archons. I could only feel them energetically. Some of them had their heart chakras opened. There was one that I think was my grandmother, and one was my great-grandmother, because they both had lived in the house that I was raised in, and they had both died in that house. So my grandfather had died there. So I think some were family, but I think there were other people, because what was going on at my family house, built in 1840s, is that it was over a interdimensional portal. So this I'll mark that. This makes sense later in time. I've been being myself and investigating what's been going on my entire life, trying to deal with this. But let's see, I'll go out of sequence here. It doesn't make sense to go sequentially all the time. There's a portal. It starts in the stairway. So I would always see these ghosts. I'd be sitting in my living room chair. My parents would go to church on Sundays, and I didn't like to go to church. It was boring. So I went to Sunday school, and since I only lived 2.5 blocks away, my mother said, well, you can just go home. It was the 60s. It was very, very peaceful. You know, I could walk home, be home. Wasn't in any danger. And I'd go home and I'd watch cartoons. They had wonderful Sunday morning cartoons. And I remember there was H.R. Puffin stuff and all kinds of really good shows. And I'd be sitting in my mother's overstuffed chair in the living room, and behind me I'd feel something, and I'd turn around, and there was this head, this discarnate head floating. It was a man with a beard, with a kind of a goatee type beard and a mustache. And at first I'd be freaked out. This is in the middle of the day, and I'd, hide, and what am I going to do? But over time, because this happened every Sunday, eventually I started chasing this head. And at one point I got pissed, and I'd go, you son of a bee, I'm going to get you. And the head would disappear around the corner and float up the steps and go around the other corner at the top of the steps to the left. And there was a stairwell that ran from the back room upstairs to the kitchen. So that's the mystery of my life. My mother would never let anyone touch the doors on either side. She would scream furiously, don't go near that, don't open that door. In the kitchen, she had her dryer up against the door. There was another mystery about this stairwell. There was a skeleton key. You would walk to go into the kitchen, and if you look down to the left, there was a skeleton key that was hanging out of the door. And sometimes the skeleton key was there, and sometimes it was gone, and sometimes the door was cracked, and sometimes it was tight. And it's like, well, there's something going on in that doorway. So I'll go out of sequence. On the night that Princess Diana died, I was back in Pennsylvania visiting my family. And I had AOL, and they had instant chat, right? There was a new thing back then in 97. And I was chatting online to a bunch of people. And suddenly I got a psychic that was in Pittsburgh. And this guy says, hey, I'm a psychic. I go, really? And he goes, yeah, I investigate the paranormal. I said, well, I have a haunted house. Do you want to see it? And so he said, yes. So he lived in the town over called Westview, and I lived in Avalon. My mother, the house that we grew up in, my sister had boarded it up. She had put my parents in a facility where she could take care of them better. She had a new apartment, which was easier for it was all one floor, so she could take care of them better. So she had kind of locked up the house, and so we went down there, my sister and I, and this psychic met us, and I didn't tell him anything. I said, okay, here's the haunted house. So he goes from the outside straight to the stairwell. And he goes, this is it. And I go, mm-hmm. We didn't say anything. My sister and I didn't say anything. We walk around the yard. He goes to the backyard. And in the backyard, across from the alley, is my best friend's house. He goes, and it comes out here. This is a portal. It starts here and it comes out there. Now, he doesn't know any of my childhood experiences. I've said nothing to him. He goes into the house and he walks right up to the door. Now, the house had been closed up. Here, the door, there's no skeleton key, and it's open like about this much. And he's like, oh, well, let's open it. And this man was like really tall, 6'3" or 4", and he's a big guy, and he's trying to open this door, and it won't open. And he said, this is where all the entities are. So anyway, that was kind of verification of my whole life dealing with these entities going in and out of this stairwell. So you're wondering what connection this has with extraterrestrials. Well, as we're discovering in the free research and all the other researchers, there's a big connection with the other realms, other dimensions, and extraterrestrials. So I'll do the stairwell thing, and then I'll move forward in time to the ETs. When I was 16, no, I was 15, I had a best friend, she was 16. And her stepfather was chasing her around. And I think, and she said, I've got to move out of the house. My stepfather's chasing me. And so I told my parents, and they let her come as a foster child into our household. And we talked to her mother, and she said, yeah, it was different back in the 60s. Let me tell you, it was way different back then. Yeah, there's something on there. Sure. You can rest watching cartoons. On Saturday night and just sleep in on Sundays. I stopped going to church because I didn't believe in the hypocrisy of church. And one day I was sleeping in, and she got up and went down to the stairwell, and she somehow got it open. And here's what happened. So I'm sleeping, and all of a sudden I bolt up in bed and go, what in the world is going on? And I run downstairs to the kitchen. I have to go through the dining room, and I go into the kitchen. I run all the way over to this bathroom, and she's in the bathroom, and she's locked in there. She's not screaming. I said, what's going on? She says, look. And so I turned around, and there was a goal, best way to describe it, like from Spielberg's Poltergeist. Remember that goal that came out, and it goes, Arr! and it saw me seeing him, and suddenly everything started moving around the room like a hurricane inside a tornado inside the house. It picked up papers, it picked up whatever, and it was flying around. And then I just fall back. My back goes to the door where my girlfriend's on the other side in the bathroom, and I just slid to the floor. And I can't even scream. I'm so paralyzed. I've never seen anything like this. It's just way beyond anything anybody could ever imagine. Now, my mother is still in church. She stands up at church, and she says to my dad, Bill, we've got to go home right now. Get the car. And she comes home. I piece this together later. She doesn't even park the car. She gets out, runs up the steps, runs through the house. I don't know what she did. She just somehow pulled this energy of this being, and she got it to go back in this stairwell, and she closed the door, and she pushes the the dryer back in place, and she gets the two, me and my girlfriend. She says, I told you to never open that door. But she would never explain to me what was going on. We never had a conversation. It was like, don't piss off Mom. All right. So I had a very, 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 very strange childhood. So from about age 4 till 12, as I was coming home from playing with my cousins that lived 4 houses down, my mother's sister had a large family of 12 children, and I was the youngest of 3. So I would go down there. That was like the place to go. That's where all the kids were. It wasn't dark yet, but I just naturally went home. I didn't have a curfew. All the other kids started going home, and I would come home at dusk. And my mother always said, come home the front way and not the alley. I'd look over to my best friend's house, and I go, oh, is she playing on the swings? Is she still out? And suddenly the whole environment shifted. It was like, you remember on the Stargate movie, how it's all kind of liquidy? So in front of me, it was like a screen of liquid would appear. And then this being came through this portal. It was like coming through a Stargate. There were no pillars, no supporting thing, but it was just manifested right there in the backyard. Now the being looked, it was hooded, it had a long hood, it was dark. And for years, I blocked out the face because it was so terrifying. I couldn't. It's called lacune. It just blocks out your mind. I couldn't even like incorporate that into my reality. This face, and it felt like this being was trying to suck my soul out of my third eye chakra and my crown. It was like it was trying to pull my soul right out of terrified. And when we would start engaging in this almost like a telepathic battle for my soul, and then the being would say, okay, that's who you are, and he would just let me go. And then I'd run into the house, and I'd come in the back door, and I'd slam the back door, and I'd be sitting there. My heart was going, wow, a minute. And I'm just, I can't tell anybody what to say. For some reason, I always censored what I was going to say because I didn't think anybody would believe me. So I just regained my composure, and I went back and said hi to the family and acted like nothing happened. Well, there's a thing called lacune, and I would forget. And so time would go by, and I'd go back down and play with the kids, and it might be the next week or the next year, but I'd encounter this being over and over and over. It was like Groundhog Day. We'd have this battle every time, and I'd break away. Finally, until I was 12 years old, I remember this. And every time it would happen, I'd go, oh, no, not this again. This is happening again. And so finally, when I was 12, it kicked in, and I never went back in that alleyway again. Never, ever, ever went back in that alleyway again. And as I got older, I said, oh, I must be crazy. I must be insane. This is, ridiculous. How can this be? These things cannot be happening. But I kept having verification by other friends that would come back to me and say, yeah, I had a shared experience with you. So when I was 31 years old, 30 years ago, and it was my birthday, coincidentally, my dad and my mother had a stroke. My she went into cardiac arrest because my dad was going to die, and she's in cardiac arrest, and he had a stroke. And so the three kids, we finally, I was living in State College, Pennsylvania, which was 3.5, 4 hours away from Pittsburgh. But I went home in the snow on my birthday and met up with my brother and sister, and we got the parents both stabilized. They were in 2 different hospitals, and we sat down on the floor between the dining room and the living room, and we just looked at what the paramedics had done. There were needles, and looked like a war had happened. They got them both the parents stabilized and got them to the hospital. And we just got real with each other. We said, what in the world happened growing up in this house? Finally, we're all adults. I'm the youngest at 38. What in the world happened in this house? And so we started sharing about all the activity in this house that we had to endure, and we were afraid to talk to each other. And finally, it kept getting worse. We'd start with little things like, hey, did you see the being at the foot of your bed? And the stories just kept growing, and they go, oh, you think that was bad? I had one that strangled me, and so my brother had one that strangled him, and my sister had one. They literally grabbed him around the throat. They go, wow, I never encountered that one. And I said, well, did anybody encounter the being that comes out of Toward's house next out back? And my sister said, yes. They go, oh, no, that was real? She goes, yeah. And so she told me how she and her boyfriend were in the alley in the car making out. And all of a sudden, the being came through the portal, just like I mentioned, and came over to the car. Her boyfriend was Catholic, and he's there, oh, it's Satan. And he tries to get the car started. He dropped the keys, of course, and just as he got it started, the being came up to the door. It came much further than when it was dealing with me. It came right to the door of the car, and then her boyfriend got the car started and moved out of the way. So, and then years later, I talked to Marion, the girlfriend, and I said, was that real? And she said, oh, most definitely. She filled in a lot of details. And so we knew about the being that was like the goal. So I had this very strange house. So years later, I'm looking at David Icke's Children of the Matrix book. And I open it to his artistic rendition somebody had drawn of the Reptilian. And as soon as I saw that photo, that and it was a artistic black and white rendition, my jaw dropped, and I went, because suddenly I saw what the being looked like. It's like my mind's eye finally dropped the veil, and I could see the eyes looking at me, and I saw this reptilian being, and I reflected on it over and over, and I realized he never hurt me. That I think that what was going on is I was afraid of him, and he could have hurt me. He could have killed me. He could have taken my soul. He could have done whatever. I think I was just supposed to go astral, like many incarnations are astral, and just meet him in my etheric form so we could be in the same dimension and have a conversation. So I hope someday I can make amends or have a conversation with this reptilian, because I don't think he was a bad person at all. I think he was just a reptilian. Let's see. When I was between 9 and 10, I'm not sure exactly what year this was, I liked to go ice skating. And no, roller skating. We had a YMCA that had an indoor roller skating rink. Hold on, I got to get something to drink. And it would get very, very crowded with lots of kids. They all liked to roller skate. It was a big thing. And one day it was very cold, and they were pushing to get in, and this boy came up behind me, and I'm probably 9.5, and he grinds on me. It's really gross. And and I'm trying to push him off me, and then he whispers in my ears, and he goes, "I just got you pregnant." Now I'm 9. I don't know anything about sex, really. I don't find out until I'm 10 what it's all about, right? I'm 9, and I'm terrified, and I just sit there on the bench all night. I went with a bunch of girlfriends, and I didn't want to spoil their fun, so I just sat there on the bench all night. And I go, "Oh, I'm pregnant, and I didn't even see this boy. I don't know what this is." And I really don't know. And there's no one to ask, because my girlfriends don't know about sex. Nobody knows about sex, really. 8, 9, maybe 10 years old. So that night I go home, and I go to bed, and I just say, I don't want to live anymore. God, just take me home. I don't want to live anymore. Just take me home. That night is when the mantis came. And the mantis came, and so I'm a 9-year-old human infant. I'm pretty small, but I'm, still within the range. And this mantis holds me like a baby, like a newborn. And it feels like soft fur, like I'm being held. But I think this is just the energy that she put out there, so it felt like I was being caressed by fur. And she just sent me love and healing energy all night long, and then returned me to my bed so I'd be there when I was awake. I was there physically. And the next morning I just said to my mother, "I've got to go see my girlfriend." So let me try to fix this. I went, and who lived out back where the interdimensional portal was with the reptilians. And I told her about it. She's the only person I ever shared any kind of extraterrestrial interdimensional experience. And she said she accepted it. She didn't judge me. So I had a witness. I would invite girlfriends over. So that was all the ghost stuff. I would invite people over to have sleepovers with me. I'd say, "Okay, you want to see ghosts?" And they go, "I don't believe ghosts." "Okay, ask your mom if you could sleep over and tell me what you see." Oops, let me try this. And so some of them never came back. Almost everybody saw or heard something. And some of them never came back. They didn't want to deal with it. I'm going to try to adjust this. Okay. Let me see where I want to go with this. So the same thing was happening. Pittsburgh in the 60s was a hotbed of UFO activity. I wasn't one to go out much in the winter and look around, but in the summer I was out a lot. I liked to sleep out. And there was a place called Neville Island. And I don't know what was going on, but it was some kind of secret. There were military bases around, and there was Neville Island. There was a lot of military around the whole area. So as I was coming home at night, started at the top of the hill, I'd see these large, very large, like 6 to 8, 9, 12 feet in diameter globes, not like the orbs we're seeing now, and they were brightly colored. And I'd say, well, do you want to see a UFO? And so there was a certain path we had to come down, and they would see them if I was there. It was like I was inviting them to show themselves, and they would show themselves. And then my girlfriend or girlfriends that were with me, they'd see them too. And I go, okay, what do you see? I always do that. What do you see? Because I don't want to say what they're going to see. I said, what do you see? And they describe it to me. And I go, okay, we're all seeing the same thing. So summer 66, I was out and I was coming home, and I felt, you can always feel them, and I felt it on the back of my head. And I said, I turned around, and there they were, over the treetop, just right above the tree level. And it was a big cigar-shaped ship. And you could see the little, I think they were grays, but I couldn't quite tell because it was pretty far away. But you could still see beings in there, in the cigar-shaped ship. And they stood there, and they hovered there, and I stood there. And what was really odd was that all the traffic stopped. All the crickets stopped. And I've heard this before. The crickets stopped, the traffic stops, and it was just me and this ship. And I said, thank you for showing yourself to me. And I eventually went in. So we're going to back up to one of the big events. Summer of 58, when I was 4 years old, I was out picking flowers. It was probably spring, and the buttercups were blooming. And I was picking flowers in the side yard. I was picking them for my mother. And I started to go into the house. I had picked a nice little bouquet, and I put them all even. I trimmed the ends so it was all neat. I like to make things neat. And I was going into the house with my buttercup bouquet for my mother. She had a little fence, little short, like 1 foot fence, and I stepped over, and I started to step over it. And in midday, suddenly I'm up on a mothership. It's a beautiful ship. They take me on a tour, and what I realized is that part of it they were creating in the moment for my convenience. That's the best way to put it. That they can create whatever form they want, because it's they're just that level of advancement. They can manifest. So they created a screen, a theater, but I hadn't been into a movie theater yet at that point in time. I was only 4, so back in the 50s, 60s, parents didn't take their kids to movies. They would go to drive-ins instead. So the first screen was a side view of the Earth, and there were 3 beams coming down from all 3 directions, and the Earth just blew up into stardust. It was just gone. And then that scene faded, and they showed me another scene of the Earth, and it was another multiverse. And in that multiverse, the planet was whole, but there was a lot of destruction, very little life showing. And they kept showing different variations, more life each variation, less destruction, until they showed me 3 utopian possible future histories. And they stopped. There were 24. They showed 24 altogether, and they stopped and they said, which, and I'm trying to get if they said multiverse or reality. It's not really English, right? So it meant the same thing, multiverse, reality. Do you choose? And so I had seen one of the utopian ones I liked. It wasn't the last one, because the last one was kind of like nothing left to do. And I thought, well, if there's nothing left to do, then what is life about? Oh, and the other key point is that when I was on board ship, I was my eternal self. I was simultaneously in my 4-year-old form, but I had my awareness of the totality of my existence, and I was received as such. So the theater room was for the 4-year-old self, and the remembrance was from my eternal self. And so I chose one of the utopian ones. And when I chose it, hold on. when I chose that reality, I was back on the earth again. And they were still above me, but I couldn't see them from my eyes, but I could feel them. And they said, they had to leave. But they said, you've come here to do something very important for humanity. And that has kept me alive all my life, because there are times I could have left, a lot of times. Hold on. I had a mother who was undiagnosed schizophrenic, and I think she could not handle living in an interdimensional portal. And it affected her. And she was very Christian, and everything she symboled it Christian. And she would say anything paranormal was the devil, was evil. And she would just pray, and she became evangelistic. She went from being Presbyterian to evangelistic, because she didn't know how to deal with the other realities coming through. Both sides of my family were Masons. My grandfather was very, very high up. I had a remembrance after I went into hypnosis with my husband, looking at the different episodes. So this gets far out, but I'll go there. Do you have any questions before I go to the next thing? Any comments?
Well, I have some abiding questions that are kind of building.
Okay.
And one of the abiding questions you began to answer, which was why you? Why are you being given all of these experiences and training in the dimensional ecology? And then you said because they said to you because you're going to do something very important for humanity. So you're being sort of trained or acclimated to the multidimensional ecology, to the dimensional ecology.
Right.
Sort of an observation as I'm tracking you through your experiences.
Okay. So one of the things I recovered under hypnosis, I always asked, or I had pictures. They're like little clues, like here's a picture of your childhood. And mother would give me, as a very small infant, to my grandmother and grandfather, and they would take me somewhere. And so I said to Sasha, I go, where did they take me? What was going on there? I could remember bits and pieces of it. I was very tiny. I was, an infant. And so we went into hypnosis. So my grandfathers on both sides were Masons. I think that both my parents had arranged marriages. There's a breeding program probably to keep the lines going, even beyond the royals. And I have past life memories of, and I'll share that. That's part of, I told you I came in with past life memories, a lot of them. So what I uncovered in hypnosis is that my grandfather would take me to the Masonic lodge. And, you can take this with a grain of salt, but this is what came out. When you do hypnosis, you just have to accept the process, right? So I'm in a deep hypnotic state. My husband's a hypnotherapist, and I said, where did I go? So they took me to the lodge. My grandmother was there because my grandfather was not real comfortable with carrying an infant, for one thing, and he was also the driver. So they went over to the Masonic Lodge, the big one in Pittsburgh that he had helped co-found. He's supposed to be the founder of it, but I can't track that down. And my grandmother can only go, I think they let her inside like a waiting room, but she was not permitted to go into the hall. And then my grandfather took me into a very large room with a table that would seat, I guess, about 30 men. They were all in suits. And they set me down in the center. And I'm a little baby. I'm kind of in swaddling clothes, right? And all of a sudden I stand up. And I'm only what are babies? I don't know, 12 inches, 24 inches, somewhere in there, 12 to 24 inches. And I stand up and they're asking me questions. and I'm addressing them. Now, once again, I'm my eternal self. I'm not an infant. I'm my eternal self. And somehow I can stand, and I take form more of a miniaturized adult, but like a child. I'm not, my legs can support me, and I can hold my own weight. And I'm talking to them about this time right now. And we tried to recover what was said, and it's not time. The information will not come unless it's time. So I'm going to have to revisit this. But I know that it's part of what you and I are doing, Alfred, the work that all of us are doing right now. It's so critical what we're doing that we're on track. And basically, these are all these Illuminati assholes, excuse my French, and they backed off, and they just realized there's not much they can do. But, of course, they try to do whatever they're going to do. So, and then they took me back home. So I know I'm protected by someone. They weren't allowed. They could not kill me. They couldn't do anything to me. I'm of the bloodline. They took me home. So that I'm going to revisit someday. But that was a critical experience. Let's see. So another piece of the puzzle. I've always been able to travel astrally all my childhood. So I've been having experiences looking back, with the extraterrestrials all my childhood. I have several experiences. I have some recollection of the Greys coming, because I used to run and jump into my bed, and I go, somebody's going to grab my feet. I remember I would look at it and go, what am I so afraid of? Who's grabbing me at night? So they do blank you out. So I was having those experiences, which were rather unconscious, but I was aware that I was having experiences all during my childhood. But the conscious experience I would have was that I would be in an all-white room, and I didn't see it until, what was it, 2001: A Space Odyssey, or was that 2010, where they're sitting in the all-white room, and you can't even tell where they're sitting, and there's somebody talking to me. And every time I have questions, I can go there, they answer my questions, and a lot of times the answer is, you'll know in time. It's not time yet, not time. So I've had somebody, and I've been aware that there's one faction that could want to kill me, and the other faction that was protecting me. And I didn't have any idea of the picture I do now, but I just was totally aware of this my entire childhood. So one of the things I would do is I would go astrally out of my body, out the crown chakra. My bedroom was up in the second floor of the building in front of the house, and I'd walk all the way down the hallway and all the way down the stairs, and all the way down into the basement. And then across from the basement is a crawl space. But when I went down there, it would open up. You would just go through the crawl space, and then it opened up into a big cavern. And they were giant, size of a room. Each vat was the size of a room on their side, giant vats in a big cavern. And the walls were naturally illuminated, but it was dim. You could see, though. You could walk through giant cobblestones. I mean, we're talking about, in the 60s, a lot of the roads were still cobblestone in Pittsburgh. They've now paved them over, but the human size normal, these were giant cobblestones, and there was a drip, 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 and I would walk past this. I knew I was supposed to go down further, and I'd go down further into a room where there was another crawl space, and you couldn't get into the room, but it was glass all around, kind of like a police room, right? But it was all the way around, 360. It was a square room. And I know I've been in that room, but I can't recall that part. But I would go there all the time. So one time coming back, I was curious, and I put my finger into the dripping liquid. And for some reason, my astral self could actually feel it. And I think it was blood. I think it was blood. I think it was something really, really dark going on there. And I was going somewhere past it, but I still had to go this creepy dark way to get there. And I did that. I had to get out of the house finally. I got married at 16. I had to leave that house, because as long as I was there, well, I didn't know any better, but as long as I was there, I thought I was going to have all these experiences, and I just wanted to be normal. Kids just want to be normal. I just wanted to get married, have kids, and be normal. I didn't really want all this. I didn't think I signed up for it, but as I got older and older, I realized, yeah, I've signed up for this. This is my life, and I'm supposed to live it. So it's all perfect in the grand design. Um, so I was always flying. I'd go, besides going down there, I'd go out the front window and I'd fly. So, and now who do you talk about astral projection when, back in the 60s? No one. So nowhere. So I was so delighted to find Robert Monroe and his information. I go, oh, this is what's going on. So that was a part of my life, and that comes into play later on. So flying dreams. Also during this period, we're still back pretty young yet. I was out playing one day. I came in and I was crying. There was a huge lump behind my ear. My mother took me to the doctor. I pieced it together later when I read Bud Hawkins. That was an implant behind my ear. And I think the reason they had it swell up is because I would remember that it was a real thing, that my sister remembered it too, this thing that went on behind my ear. I called it a bee. What Bud Hawkins says, it's a little drone, and it knocks you out, and then they take you on board the ship. So that was another encounter. Let me see here. When I was 4, this was a really horrendous thing, but I think there was some satanic things going on in that house. Years later, I met Janet Swerdlow, and I've never explored this with her, but Janet, Montauk book, Peter Moon stuff, and I invited her over to Hawaii in the early parts of the 2000s. I don't know what year it was, 2003 or 4. And he came over and he said, Janet Swerdlow, Janet, my wife cries every time she hears, I mention your name. I go, Seward, your wife, Janet Swerdlow, cries when you mention my name. Why? And he says, because you're her twin. I go, what do you mean? He says, well, they use you in rituals together. I go, yeah. She goes, no, there's other rituals. There's rituals that are for the light and for goodness. I go, well, I sure hope so. But I was just an aside. I just bookmarked that. But back to what happened. So I'm 4, between 4 and 5. And my mother, apparently they were swingers. My parents were swingers. And or something was going on, but she had a boyfriend over while my dad was at work. He was a postal worker, so he was gone all day. And there was this neighbor, and I know who he was. All these characters are dead now. There's not a single one left in that generation. They're all gone. And he's naked. My mother's naked. I fall and I slip onto his lap, and he grabs me and he shoves his penis down my throat. And there's a point where you choke. So I choke and I'm dead and I'm out of body. And my mother's freaking out, pounding this guy. I'm out of body watching all this. She's pounding this guy. They call the neighbor. The neighbor tries to resuscitate me. A lot of time is going by. I want to say half an hour to 45 minutes. They're trying to revive me. And meanwhile, I'm having an experience with I guess the dead zone, right, where you go the in-between. And I have all my guides, and they're all there, and we're watching this, and they're showing me the multiverses, the same things I saw on this ship. And so the dead zone is the same as the extraterrestrial zone. And they're saying, well, you don't have to go back. It's all your choice. If you want to go back, you can go back. And I saw how upset my mother was. I saw what would happen if I remained dead. And bad things happened to it. There were like 4 or 5 parallel timelines they showed me. And if I stayed dead, bad things happened to my mother, father, brother, sister. They just could not handle the death of their youngest child. So I said, okay, I'll come back. Plus, I always knew that I have more to do. I wasn't done. I wasn't complete. So they showed me how to fix my broken neck, which I repaired. And then I stood up, and I was full of light. It was like my aura was super bright. And I went from being like dead on the ground to literally just standing upright and saying, I was so full of love, because the other side is just pure love. It's like swimming in love. And I was so high and full of love and happy, and I just said, hi. And the three adults who were in the room just screamed and ran out the door. And then I got really tired because I was adjusting from the higher vibratory frequency to this 3D plane. So I crawled into bed and I forgot about it until I met Dr. Lessin. And two things happened in 97. My perpetrator, my mother, my handler, died. And I met Dr. Lessin. So when I met him, we started doing therapy because I knew there was a lot of repressed memories, and I knew there were a lot of things I had to explore. And I had been to talk therapy, which was very ineffective. So I needed to do hypnotherapy to get behind all these incidences of things that had happened to me. So with his help, I uncovered the rape. And when I was reliving it, I literally vomit. You know psychology, you know therapy. A lot of times you vomit up. You know, what did you want to say? And I literally, when I accessed what had happened, I vomited up, and I kept vomiting. And as I was vomiting, I was back, and I saw everything. I saw every brow sweat. It was like I was on 3D cameras because I was zooming around the room. I was flying, and I heard everything, and I smelled it, I heard it, I saw it, and it was like right, I was there, and I finally got it out, and that was a turning point in my life because up until that point, I was I did conscious level. Oh yeah, I'm happy. You know, I got a life, and wanted to live. But on a subconscious level, I kept getting very, very sick, and I was literally dying. And I had lung disease, and I had to get out of Pennsylvania. Had to get out of bed. This teacher. One other thing, in 58 or 59, watching TV, and I'm watching these missiles crash, and I turn to my parents and my brother and sister, and I go, "What is with all these missiles crashing? What do you mean?" And they said, "Oh, we're not in space yet." And I said, we're not in space yet? What do you mean we're not in space? So it was like I had been in space. You know, that was my reality. I'd been on board ship many times, and here, you know, as human being, and I just felt so like doomed. It's like, oh, when are we going to catch up? When are we going to catch up? So in kindergarten, I stayed home one day because I got the implant in my nose right here, up here. My nose was just running all day so bad. My mom said, "Don't go to school." Uh, oh, I wrote a note. Who's grabbing my feet at night? Yeah, I kept wondering what's going on. There's somebody grabbing my feet. There's beings at the foot of my bed. Um, then when I was, I'm trying to piece this together in the middle 60s. Excuse me. The Mothman came to Avalon Park. See, it's way beyond. It's like everything you can imagine has happened in my life, and I have to look back at this and go, this is some kind of play screen. You know, they're writing this play for me to act out. So I'm a little girl. I'm down in Avalon Park, and they go, there's a being flying around. Now I didn't get to see it, but I was there when Mothman, and then the newspapers came and they were taking photos and they were interviewing everybody in this local television station. And once again, you go, as an adult, you're going, there's no Mothman. What do you mean? What is this creature? And then they publish a book and they say, yeah, it was all through the tri-state area. Okay. Um, so I realized that I was being geared to be sexually active at a young age. And I think that's because of the genetic breeding program. And so when I was, you know, getting my first period, I was 13. I said, you know, sex is interesting and love and marriage, but I'm not going to have sex until I'm 17. I know I'm not going to be mature enough till I'm 17. There's a part of me that's like this eternal soul, and then there's a part that's a child. So I made this conscious decision. But I grew up in the 60s, and the kids in my neighborhood were very promiscuous, and so I ended up disobeying my own rule. So I started having sex um, things why I'm even diagnosed as pregnant, but I've had my entire reproductive years experiencing being taken, and I started to document it in my second marriage when I was trying to get pregnant. I wanted to have one child that I could keep, but every time I'd you know, be at the point of conception, they would come again 2 weeks later. What I eventually found out is that there's different breeding programs. I'm not in the gray breeding program. I'm in more like the Anunnaki or the tall whites. Of course, because I'm in the bloodline, it makes sense. So I'm in a breeding program. They wanted to diversify my genetics, and that they've been kind of orchestrating me to different relationships. They definitely don't like it when I disobey, and I'll explain that one down the line. So I never got pregnant, didn't have to worry about it, but uh, but I didn't want to be too sexually active. I was conflicted because I didn't want to be immoral. So I ended up getting married at 16, so I would be monogamous. And I was kind of like, deal with that. I'm just monogamous. So around the same age, let's see. So they were telling me to marry this one, have sex with that one. And it wasn't like words or sounds of it was just, let me explain this. When I met my first husband, I was 12 years old. And I went home and I had a very vivid dream of our wedding night and making love and having sex. And so I became obsessed with this poor man. I was 12 and he was 3 years older. So, 15-year-olds that one date 12-year-olds. And I had no form when I was 12. I was skinny as a rail. So it wasn't until I was 16 and he was 19 that we got together. But the whole thing was orchestrated. I knew we were going to get married. When I met him, and I was 15, by admiring him from afar, and I had a girlfriend. I said, "Oh, I saw Lanny today." Oh, just fantasizing about him. He was my idol, and I had never talked to him. And then the day we walked on the moon, July 21st, no, July 20th, 1969. That's right, it was. I'm sitting on a wall, trying to regain my composure because I just broke up with my boyfriend. He walks over, and he notices me. So we have a little. He kisses. And are you still there? Because I think you're frozen.
Yes.
Did we lose?
No. I'm here.
Okay, because your image is frozen. So I go home and I say to my sister, I just met the man I'm going to marry. And by November 13th of 1970, we were married. So that's what I mean. It's like I get these prophecies, these things, and I know right away. The same thing happened with my second husband and then my third husband. As soon as I meet them, I know, oh my goodness, we're going to get married. And it always ends up true. So let me see. So right around that time, I get a very painful scoop mark on my right tibia. And this thing hurts horribly. And I still have the marking. And so apparently they take a scoop mark out of the tibia. That's where they get the DNA. So they're doing these tests on me, and I'm aware of that. And I start a few years later, I find Bud Hopkins' books. What a lifesaver to finally get someone to kind of explain what's going on. So I escape from home. I get married at 16. I move out of the house. And so I kind of have a little break point. Although when I was 21, I had a couple things happen in my early 20s. I'm levitating. No, I'm not levitating. I'm in another realm, and I'm teaching people, as far as I can see, how to levitate. And we're preparing for this time when something's going to happen. And I have to teach everybody you have to rise up high enough in order for the ships to see you. So there's always these ships. And my whole childhood, I see ships all the time. Every time I'm taking a walk, there's always ships. There's always this awareness that they're watching. So I get into my first marriage. I married Lanny, right? But it was very dysfunctional. He was violent. It wasn't what I wanted, and I'm not wanting to stay alive. So I go see Christopher Reeve. I'm going to see Christopher Reeve, his very first Superman movie, and I come home and I have this profound dream. And he inspires me to stay alive. See, I had a way of checking out, which is lung disease. And I've had that in all my past lives. If I don't want to live, I get lung disease and die. So I was getting pneumonia, and I just, I'm so depressed. Like, I have this violent man for a husband. Everything's so dysfunctional. I just want to die. So I go see Superman. And that night, it wasn't Christopher Reeve. It was some extraterrestrial, but it came to me, and they appear as a figure that you can accept. And he inspired me to stay alive and showed me the future. He said, if you just stay here, you stay alive, things are going to get better. You're going to find this true love. You're going to find a better life. You're not going to be here forever. So, and then I took that in, and I realized that's exactly what's going to happen. Is that something better is going to happen. I've got to stay here. So I go and I get out of the first marriage. I jump from the frying pan into the fire. I go to the second marriage. I move with him to State College, Pennsylvania. And I'm going through the infertility stuff, and they are taking me like clockwork every month. So at one point, I get so frustrated. And then I start leaping into my bed, like when I was a young child, afraid to walk, afraid to get up and pee at night. I go, this is ridiculous. So I realized they're all through the room. I've had a couple episodes where one time I was paralyzed and all the lights were going around the house. And I go, oh, now you're taking him. What are you doing with him? Well, my second husband was somehow directly related to Washington. See, they're matching us up with the bloodline. And one day he just sits down and he has this thing and he says, look, we're directly descended from George Washington. And I go, oh. It didn't make sense. So I started reading the bloodline books, but now it's like, yep, they keep matching me up with the right people. Of course, these people are a certain bloodline. Most of them have light eyes, either light green or light blue. And okay, so I get this punch mark right in the back where I can't even reach. You can't reach that spot. That spot in your back you can't reach, and it's a punch mark. And I'm angry, and I go, God, I want to know what's going on. What is going on? I want proof. Well, be careful when you ask for proof. So I wake up the next morning, and I'm getting dressed for work, and I'm putting on my nylons, and my husband goes, what in the world is that? And so I have this, it's a punch mark in my back. And another time I asked for proof, I got from the bottom of my buttocks to the right shoulder. And so the universe or God or source always leads me to information. What's this about? So I pick up Dr. Edith Fiore's book. He was her husband, and that's because they flip you back in your bed. And I have the same mark. So, okay, the reptilians are back in my life. What's going on there? Okay. So then I started a romance because my second marriage was getting more and more dysfunctional because he was, anyway, I shouldn't say too much about him because he might listen to this and sue me, but he it just got dysfunctional. And so I started my internet account at Penn State University. I got a job at Penn State University, and there's a brand new thing. This is 1990, 91, right? And they go, I go, what's everybody working on? They go, it's called the internet. I go, what's that? Well, we'll get you an account. So I got an internet account because I worked for the university. And I started talking on these boards. They were called A-lists. They have all these listservs, list boards, right? And it was people that were out there, and they're talking about paranormal and UFOs. And there's Phil Schneider, and there's Robert Lazar, and I start talking to this guy about Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu, and he's over here in Hawaii, where I am now, but I was in Pennsylvania, and he's told me that he's an adept at astral sex, and that he was one of the early developers of civil mind control, and he was making 6 digits after he came back from Vietnam in the early 70s, and he was an anthropologist, and he was brilliant, and he said, I've had astral sex, and I said, oh really? Well, if you can have astral sex, come to me. Well, be careful what you ask for. Anyway, I won't get real graphic on this one, but he came to me, and it was like a physical penetration of a penis into a vagina, and I started to pulsate, and it was a Kundalini awakening, and I'm vibrating. I have a Kundalini awakening, and I'm asking, what in the world was that? He says, well, you ever hear of Kundalini? I says, no. So I go down to the only metaphysical bookstore. Well, it's a bookstore with a little metaphysical section, and I asked the clerk, can you show me something on Kundalini? And so we started having this romance, astral sex for several years, and it's like, well, are you cheating on your spouse if you're having astral sex? That was a whole dilemma. I don't know. We got involved with each other, and we were both in dysfunctional, I keep having dysfunctional relationships. That was my life up until then. And so we eventually met, and we started having a real affair, and the connection was like a soul connection, very deep and profound. And that's why I moved to Hawaii. And it wasn't the right thing to do, and I'm sorry, mea culpa, but it's what I needed to do to get from Pennsylvania, because if I would have stayed in Pennsylvania, I was so depressed with all these unresolved conflicts. I needed to really sit down with a therapist and unwind my life and everything that was going on, that we realized, his name was Ed, he said, well, I was a catalyst to get you here to meet Sasha, who I'm with now. So let me see where I go to. And then they showed, that was the first time they were showing me the children. So I started seeing the children. Now they showed me one, and what they do is they take the man and the woman, and they hybridize them with other elements to make them more than human. So you could have a dozen parents in a hybrid child, because they can mix and match DNA, just like Robert Heinlein describes in Time Enough for Love. And so they showed me this child. It was a little girl, and she was a toddler, which didn't match the time frame of when I had sex with this man. But they said, you're not going to raise her, but here she is, and she was a toddler. But the time frame is different between what we're doing going through linear time and what they have on. So they showed me her in the future, but it's all simultaneous, right? That's a paradox. It's hard to grasp. Okay, same point. I go to a pulmonary specialist. I keep getting lung disease. I can't take the winters. They're very hard. I get pneumonia every year. And I finally go to a female pulmonary specialist, and she says, you're not going to live long if you stay here. In fact, I had a death rattle. I was getting pneumonia again. And she said, you got about 6 months to live, or if you survive this, you're not going to live to an old age. You're just not going to make it. And so I kept asking my husband to turn off the heat, and he wouldn't turn off the heat, and it was very, very cold there. And so I needed to get out of there. So at that point, I came home from the doctor telling me that I didn't have long to live. And once again, I resigned. Okay, I guess I'm going to die. What's that about? And since I'd been dead, it was, on my subconscious level, I was accepting of that. I knew that was okay. but my ego self wanted to stay alive. So that night, this I called it the Archangel Michael. Sometimes we don't know what to do when we get visitations from extraterrestrials or interdimensionals, so we symbol things in our current belief structures, right? So some people see Buddha, some people see Jesus, some people see angels, some people see grays or mantis. So anyway, it was a very beautiful, almost androgynous, angelic type being, and he says, "I'm your husband." And I've come to make love to you the way you've always wanted to be made love to. And I went, what? You can't be my husband. My husband's lying here in bed. What's going on here? And and he said, never mind. I'll come back a time when it'll make sense, but just realize I'm your husband. I'm going to make love to you like you've always wanted to be made love to, and just stay alive. Basically, stay alive. And of course, I wake up the next day, and when people come with these type of prophetic visitations, it fills up your body with love and energy. It's like you're high on a high vibratory frequency, and you wake up and your feet can barely touch the ground, and you feel, yes, I'm alive and I want to stay alive and I'm gonna do it. Okay, so all this led to the downfall of my marriage, and I moved to Hawaii. I finally confessed I couldn't take it. In therapy, we always find that that the partner's always going to find out, and it's most likely that if you're cheating on your spouse, you're the one that's going to tell them, because you can't hold it. You just can't hold it. So I said, I feel bad. I'm having an affair, and we tried to, stay together, and we decided to part consciously and set each other free because it wasn't working anyway. So I moved to Hawaii, and I meet up with Ed, and then things just went really super fast. So I get an apartment on one block away from Ala Moana Shopping Center. So we're talking about right in the heart of Honolulu, million people population, and I have Ed there, and we're having our wonderful romance, and he's had missing time, so we're sharing all this stuff. He's a very magical person. He's very spiritual. He's very evolved, and he said, I've had a lot of missing time, but I just can't. I don't want to even go there. Some people have that, and they don't want to even go to understand it. So we were starting to talk about it, but there was still that censoring. I don't really quite want to go there, so we didn't talk about it too much. But we're lying in bed, and this was a two-directional experience. So I'm up on the 14th floor, and there's a big picture window, and I left it open because I'm up on the 14th floor. And parked outside, like car had pulled up, is a ship that's about, it fills up the window, right? You can pretty much see it, and it's parked outside. I don't know what people saw from below, but it's just like that incident of the woman in New York. And if somebody was awake that in the night, they probably would have seen it. From the other side was the door going to the hallway. This is a high-rise apartment. Most people live in high-rises in downtown Honolulu, and the door started to pulsate like it was being pushed from the outside, and it would go whoop, and then it would compress back, whoop, press back, and I go, what in the world's going on with this door? And then finally, about 4 or 5 times of it, stretching and pulling back, this was the full-on grays, and they come through the door, and that's all I remember until morning. And I wake up, and we're like third eye chakra to third eye chakra looking at each other. We both open our eyes at the same time. We're looking at each other's eyes, and that's not how people sleep. I don't care how much you like each other. You're not going to sleep third eye to third eye. And we both knew what happened, and I go, look how they returned us. They wanted to make sure we got this. So I got involved with a group called Your Spiritual Center, and they were doing what's called table tipping. I'd never seen this before, and it was a new age spiritual group, and they met at the Hilton Hawaii Village, and every Sunday, just like regular church, and they would bring out a table, and they would and the table would actually tip once for yes and twice for no, and people would ask questions, and they'd say, well, oh, this is a trick. Well, bring your own card table. And so people would bring their own card tables from home and say, well, you sit up here. It doesn't matter who's got on the card table. We're going to have it. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I've never seen it since then. And so they invite me because I'm the only haole there. There's very few haoles. It's mostly Asian Polynesian mix, and they're so excited to have this little haole girl. That's what they call white people. And they said, "Oh, you're very psychic intuitive. We want you for our group." And I said, "Well, I don't have any money." They said, "We're going to give you a scholarship. We want you in our group." So we were doing this table tipping. They started asking who I was, and they were asking who everybody was. But when they got to me, they said, "Well, this is a table tipper," and they ask questions, and it's like, well, she's Pleiadian or she's extraterrestrial. And so like there's verification. It's like, okay, so I'm not normal. This whole group of 35, 40 people recognize that I'm the extraterrestrial among them. So am I extraterrestrial? Maybe I'm not quite human. I still can't quite figure that one out. So I broke up with Ed because I fixed his marriage. He went back to his wife. I was happy for him, actually, because I think he was better off with his wife, and they're still together. It's 20 years later, and I found a new boyfriend. His name was Jason, and I said to Jason, I says, you sure you want to get involved with me, because weird things happen to people that sleep with me? And he says, I don't mind, because he said, oh, I know how to do martial arts. I'm spiritual. I said, okay, great. So one night we wake up. And we're both flat on our backs, which I don't sleep on my back, and we're both flat on our backs, and we wake up at the same time. We could see each other's eyes are open. We kind of look at each other from the side. We're still looking, our faces are still face forward, and you could see little spots of something, and we turn down the cover together simultaneously, and there's blood. And then we turn it down, and there's more blood. And finally, at the same time, we just flip the blanket off, or flip the sheets off, and there's blood from head to toe on both sides. It's like a scene out of what was that? The Godfather. Remember, I'm looking for I'm thinking there's a horse's head down there. It's like, oh my God, what's going on here? And we're there, are you okay? Are you okay? And we start looking at each other. There's not a mark on either of us. I'm not on my period. And he just says, okay. So he gets up and he gets out the spray and wash. And he says, we're just going to wash these sheets and never talk about this again. So I don't know what that was about. That was like a weird mystery. Another time I never heard of the shadow people. I'm sleeping in my bed, and all of a sudden I'm standing at the foot of my bed watching something, a shadow being, approach my body. And I'm going, I start to realize, wow, I'm out of my body, and wow, what's that? Who's that going? It's me. And I watched it from the side, and it took its finger and it went right on my tooth. And the moment it hit my tooth, I popped back in and I pushed it out. I don't know what it was going to do with my body, but I never heard of the shadow people. Okay, so then during this 4-year period with Jason, he's from a military family. So once again, this is probably an arranged relationship, and they're probably using us for breeding. And so he gets a job on Johnston Atoll. And Johnston Atoll is a military base 800 miles southwest of Hawaii in the Pacific Ocean. And it's where the U.S. government would take all the chemical weapons of the world, along with the Russians and other people, and break them down into their basic elements and neutralize them. So they had a big factory on one side where they did this process, but it was very dangerous being on the island. So you had a gas mask that you carried with you 24/7. Wherever you went, you had to have your gas mask, because you never knew when you were going to have to stick it on your face. You had to take it to and from work with you. You had to have it 24/7. So it was kind of scary living there. When I landed there, I got a job there. My boyfriend got a job there because of his military background, his military family. His dad used to work in the nuclear facilities. When he was a kid, he said he would go to the silos and see the big nuclear warheads from above. They open silos, and he'd sit there and look at them. And so he got in. And I said, oh, are you really going to get a job there? Are you just, are you really just leaving for a job? Or so December of 95, I get a job. I get a job interview, and I'm going to Johnston Atoll, and I'm flying on one of those big military craft, and it was the most amazing island. It looks like a aircraft carrier. They dredged it around, and there's a real deep part. I want to say it's on the north side of the island, and it's where Dr. Michael Sala said in 2009 that the extraterrestrials had a meeting. It's a group of really tiny islands. I'm talking about an island you could walk around in 15 minutes, or these little tiny islands, and they're full of birds. So there must be one a little bit bigger, but they're all in a common atoll, and that's where the ETs met in 2009. So you can Google that, people, Dr. Sala with the ET meeting. But I was there in 1995 to 96. And as soon as I landed there, now there's no vehicles there except for the government has vehicles, but humans don't have vehicles, workers don't have vehicles. So we had bicycles. So my boyfriend bought me a bicycle. He says, I'll be right back. I'm going to bring you your bicycle. Sit on this bench. So he's gone to get this bicycle for me. And this guy comes up to me and he says, welcome to Johnston Atoll, to Joint U.S. Extraterrestrial Base. And I go, really? Now, this guy doesn't know me from Adam. It's literally my first hour on the island, and he's telling me this stuff. And he starts to talk more, but then he sees Jason coming up behind me with my bike, and he says, I got to go. Nice meeting you. I never saw him again. So, so I don't tell Jason. It's like a mystery. I just file that one. So Jason, poor Jason, he's on the other side. He died in 2005. He's an alcoholic, but he got fired because he's an alcoholic. I don't care what street you have. And I had signed a year contract, so I was stuck there. So when he left, he says, you don't do alone very well. Get yourself a boyfriend. So I was a cougar. I got a younger boyfriend. And sometimes on these bases, they have these relationships of conveniences because partners are somewhere else. So I had a boyfriend to keep me company. It was okay with my boyfriend, and it was okay with his wife. So we were keeping each other company. So let me get a drink. So this is about a year later. It's a year later. It's actually that was December of 95, so it's December of 96. And I'm making love with this boyfriend. And they just issue a thing that you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to have sex with. Meanwhile, the whole island was like Peyton Place. If you looked outside, there were people sneaking in and out of all these rooms all the time. It was just an amazing Peyton Place. But they put an official decree: you're not allowed to do that. If you're a guy and you're married, or if you're not allowed to have sex, it was like, oh yeah, right. So, but the decree came out, and we had made love, and we're in the bed. We're looking up at the fire detector, smoke detector, and something looked different, and we went, oh, there's a camera in there. Now I had a tour. The guys were always trying to pick me up, and back then I looked pretty good. I had a tour with this guy, and I didn't know what it was about, but he said, "Look up here. We can see everything. We can hear everything." So that he was showing me this advanced technology way beyond what we had in 1995 about what their surveillance was. And he said, we can hear everything on the island. We can hear right through your bedroom wall. We can hear it all. So I was aware of that. There was something else I wanted to say, but I just forgot it. Okay, so I'll keep going with this story. So we realized we were found out. We were discovered. We knew it. we didn't know if anything would happen. We just knew it. We went, oh my goodness. So I went home to my room, and he went home to his. It wasn't that night, but the next night, I get picked up by 6 Greys, accompanied by 6 military, and they're carrying me like a surfboard. And my body is screaming bloody murder. and but I'm still able to communicate telepathically with the gray that's holding my right foot, and I'm screaming. And I said, "Why isn't anybody rescuing me? I'm screaming very loud, and this is a very tiny island. It's only a half mile by 3 miles. You could hear me scream everywhere." And the gray in the right foot very calmly says, "Go ahead, scream all you want. You're in an energy field, and nobody can hear you." So when he said that, I just relaxed into it, and I said, "Okay, nothing I can do." Now, I've been with the Greys, and I've been with all these extraterrestrials all my life. So there's a part of me that is comfortable with all of this. But there's still, because I didn't make the connection consciously through therapy, the reality shifts. So my subconscious is trying to adapt to my conscious mind, and the reality that I think I'm living in, which is nothing like reality, right? It's all this UFO, ET stuff going on and ghosts, but it's that's not acceptable to the normal world. So I'm having to deal with this conflict. So I relax into it, and they take us down to the beach, and they set me down. I'm just standing on the beach, and I can see my boyfriend. He's being carried from the other direction, and he's kicking. He's not relaxed at all. He's screaming and kicking, but there's nothing they can do. And the military just walking. They're not even like paying attention. It's like it's nothing. So they take him down, and then this little I call it like a Billy Meyer beam ship appears, and we just by that point he calmed down. I don't know what happened. I think he saw me, and he just this beam ship. And then the beam ship goes out, launches out past the coral reef, which is the real deep part that they dredged. The official story of Johnston Atoll is they dredged this for the submarines in World War II. And Johnston Atoll is where they launched the nuclear testing over to Bikini Atoll after World War II. And in fact, here's the story. The official story is that one of the launches failed. It blew up about 100 feet above the island, and they took the top layer of the atoll and they scraped it over to the far side of this island, and they put it behind a chain link fence, which is really weird, right? So, and then you would go jogging or riding your bikes past this chain link fence where men would don full uniforms that were working in there, and we're getting the win. There's something that's not true here, and I just kept looking at it. It was so surreal. This is nuclear waste, and we're walking past it, and the winds are blowing, and there's people in suits, and you're saying that that's toxic, but I'm 100 feet from that. And there was more wildlife there than I've ever seen anywhere. There were birds on. If you came out in the morning and a bird had laid an egg on your bike, you were not allowed to move your bike. You had to call the wildlife people, and they took care of the eggs. They gave you another bike until the egg cracked. That's how it was. They so revered the wildlife, which was everywhere. So it was just a paradox. So continuing this episode, so we're on the edge of the beach, and we go on a beam ship, and we go to an underwater installation in the deep part of the dredging, and you can see it if you Google Johnston Atoll. You'll see a really deep blue part. So that's where we were. There's an underwater base there. Now they put Vinny on one of the traditional silver tables, and he's surrounded by. I'd say there were 3 different sizes of grays. There was a tall one, and I think there was only one, and then there were some intermediate ones that were more like 4.5 to 5 feet, and then there were some of the little 3.5 feet ones. So there are 3 different sizes. And I'm sitting on a military issue hard metal chair, about 6, 7, 8 feet away from all this, and I'm looking at it, but it's hard to see what's going on with him because there's all these people, all these beings around him. And suddenly, I get this instruction to go to this room, and there's a beautiful gown from like Henry VIII time, beautiful long gown, and it's got all these gems in the material, and I put it on, and it's alive. It fits itself to me as if it was custom designed. And I look at these shoes. It's perfect length, and I'm short. I'm only 5'2". And I look at these shoes, and I have bunions. And I said, "This is going to hurt." And the instruction, "Oh no, it won't hurt." So I look at the shoes, and then I'm instructed to start walking. Now I realized that probably the jewels in the gown was something to help me with the transition to another dimension, to help this 3D form, human form, adjust to where we were going. And the shoes, every time I took a step, it was like taking 10 steps. So it was kind of like the shoes were helped me. I was gliding. I was literally gliding, but I still had to do the motions of moving my feet, one in front of the other, right? So I'm gliding, and this is all telepathic at this point, and I start to go down deeper into a more natural part of the facility. So I'm going from the artificial it's man-made to natural caverns, and the ceilings get taller and taller, and there's some kind of illumination so I can see, but it's still relatively dark, and there are doors that open on the side, and as the doors open, I see a figure. It's kind of like a shadow, and then they step into the light, and they're beautiful. They're whites. They're all white. They're I call them Anunnaki. They're tall. Everybody's taller than me. The shortest of them is about 6 foot tall, and they come out, and I see them, and they're so incredibly beautiful. They make models on the covers of magazines look ugly. They're just so radiant and beautiful. They're male and female, and they're all dressed, and there's no two costumes alike. They're all dressed to the nines, and they start filing behind me. They keep gradually getting taller and taller, and they just keep filing behind me. And I see them as the doors open, and I'm gliding and walking. And then I start hearing, is this today? Is it going to happen today? Is this the one? Is she the key? Is she the key? Is this the one? Is she the one? And so we eventually get to a very large auditorium with a solid black obsidian wall. I think it's obsidian is the word I want to use. And I'm standing there, and there's a ray of light that comes from the ceiling down, and it makes a perfect circle in the floor, like a perfect beam. And by that point, everybody had been talking at once, and it was like this cacophony of noise, and they stop, and there's complete silence. And I go, telepathically, nothing verbal, how many are here? They say 1,000. So that's a magical number, 1,000 even. There's 1,000 beings gathered here. And so I go and I stand in the light, and then everything's quiet. And then the wall, the obsidian wall, just kind of fizzles. It's almost like, and it dissolves into its molecules, and it disappears. And we see these giant feet, and we start craning our necks, and it's almost comical. And it's like, what is that? And then the being that's in a larger chamber, we can't see its head. It's a she, and she sends an avatar of herself. So she's my height, and we're looking at each other in the eye. It's puja. It's what you do in tantra. It's what you do when you really go into someone's soul. You stare in each other's souls, and you look into each other's eyes. And you actually go deep into each other's consciousness. And so we're looking at each other's souls. And it's so deep and profound when you do this that tears just come, and emotions just come, and it's so beautiful, so spiritual, and it's a dragon. And if you ever see the movie Ender's Game, they have the dragon. And I just saw it in the past couple of years since it came out, and I had read the book when I met Sasha, and I told him about this experience. He says, you got to read Ender's Game. But there's she's the mother. She's the mother of the dragons, of the Dracos. And she's deep within the earth. And the military or whoever has been wanting to talk to her. And they're in some kind of joint operation with the Greys and the Anunnaki. So we started having the dialogue. Now, I don't have the words. Once again, it's not time. But it's basically, this was in 1996. So it's about what's going on now and where we're going to. And I'm going to have to, when I feel moved, to go and perhaps recover the rest of this message. And then, of course, when they returned me, the Greys were responsible for delivering, and they had me back, and they carried me back to my bed, and they actually were kind of rude. They plopped me down. I went poof, and then they came up with a little spray, and they went shh, and I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. And then my alarm went off. They're such tricksters. So I could barely even like catch my breath and realize where I was. And my alarm goes off because I had to go to work. And and when the alarm went off, they set me free. I could move again. So I shut off the alarm. And I go, oh my God, I got to get up and go to work and act like nothing happened. And this is amazing. So I go to work. The young man I was sleeping with, Vinny, we had made a date to meet that night because there are no telephones. You can't imagine a place with no telephones, but when you're in that service environment, you can't just sit there and call everybody. It has to be strictly business, so there's no personal calls whatsoever. So you make your appointments ahead of time. So we had an appointment to meet that night. So I left work. I got through the day, and I went to meet him, but he wasn't where he said. So he left a note on his door. So I went where he was, and he was up at the arts and crafts room at what was called the JOC building. And so it was all the way up on the fourth floor. And I had just come from it. I went back and went up to the fourth floor, and there he was. And it's a giant room. See, this JOC building is designed to fit all 3,000 inhabitants of the island if the plant blows up or has a problem, because you're all supposed to run to the JOC building, and they have this washing system to get all the off of you like a bunch of cattle. You go through this washing procedure, and then you're supposed to be able to live in there until disaster relief comes and rescues us. So they have these giant rooms. It's a big box, but there's hardly anybody that actually works in there. So I'm walking across this giant room, and there's a little table way out in the middle, and it takes a while to get there, and I'm thinking, that had to be a dream. That can't be real. That was a dream. That was a dream. I know it's a dream. It was a dream. So I get up to the table, and I wasn't even going to say anything, but suddenly I said, you wouldn't believe what I dreamed last night. And he says, and he threw down a pen or something in his hand. He said, I know that wasn't a dream. And I said, oh, it wasn't. So his reality of his experience, he said, they were torturing me. And mine was completely different. But I just listened to what he was saying about how he was tortured, because that was what his experience was. So let's see. Do you have any questions, feedback?
Well, yeah. Let's kind of talk about this.
Okay.
What do all of these experiences mean to you? I mean, what's kind of your underlying experience or your vision of your mission as you're going through all of these? What do they mean to you?
Well, they were nonstop, so I could never really, some people have one experience or two experiences in their lives, and they go, they can dismiss it. But it was always proving to me. I'm the biggest doubter. It's like, well, show me, and then show me again, and show me again. So I kept having to repeat it, because I'm the first one to doubt what was going on, because I didn't have any support system. So my mission is to become a therapist, which I've done. I've learned incredible psychotherapy skills. I haven't been married for 18 years to Dr. Lessin. I've been in thousands of sessions with people. I'm a very good facilitator for this awakening that has to happen now. And I've also got into, I've totally changed my life from 10 years ago, but everything I've learned has been essential. I did a lot of consciousness stuff involving Tantra for the first part of my life with Dr. Lessin. I finally pulled into our lives the extraterrestrial stuff, been researching Sitchin, been studying all the researchers like yourselves and everybody else out there, and integrating all this information for where we are coming now. So we are, I've heard you using the analogy, and this is the analogy they told me when I was dead and when I was on the mothership. It's like a super highway. It's like there's, I sold 24 super highways, possible lanes that I could be in. But to get from one lane to the other, it's kind of like your fingers, right? And you have to shift. You can't go sideways. You have to drive and then move to right to left. So I'm gearing us all towards the multiverse, which is the win for all. Not at the where we're going to sacrifice some, but there is a point, a multiverse, the win for all. So my whole life is dedicated to the awakening of enough consciousness to allow this reality to happen, where we have a win for all, because this other one sucks. I've lived in it. I've been poor. I've been struggling. Right now, I never know. We're all 1 foot from living on the streets. I can go into town and see bag people every day. I hear all the stories. I have right now, this past 2 weeks, I see so many friends go into emergency. All these diseases are curable, that we have free energies. All this is there. That's what I've learned from my life and how I've been directed. And I'm pissed off, but I'm using my anger to create something which is a win for all. And that's what you're doing. And that's why we're having this conversation, which will go out to millions. And we need to wake up. And part of it is everybody being able to tell their story and be who they are. So I'm talking to Ray Hernandez, and he's talking about free. And I studied the BLGT community. I saw how they went from being, hung and killed to now we have gay marriages. And I studied the polyamory people. And they went from nobody knowing the word to having support groups in every town in America and in Europe. And so, yes, that's next. It's allowing people to be who they are. They're not hurting anybody. And so I've been studying the UFO field all my life. I've not only just lived this, but I started studying Von Daniken and Balakowski. I stopped going to church when I was 13 years old. I said, Mom, there's a bunch of hypocrisy here. Something's not right. And then in the 70s, I found Sitchin. But I don't stop with any one person. It's a synthesis. And so does Dr. Lessin. We're figuring out what is, and it's not just there's the reality, it's a reality. Which reality is the best reality that's going to work for humanity? And so, people can argue ad infinitum about this is the truth and this is the reality, and it doesn't even matter because all of them existed. If you could think it existed, whether it became the main operating system for the continuum or not is irrelevant. It's like, where do we want to go to? So what I like about your work, Alfred, and I've had the same vision, is where can we go with this? We don't even have anything to wrap our heads around. We need to really write it down. All we have is this Illuminati paradigm of the negative extraterrestrials, whoever they are. I don't think it's any one particular group. I think there are bad beings, like we have Hitlers. They all are in alignment with each other, and they're good beings, like we have Buddhas and Christ. And they're all, in most humanity's in the middle. We're figuring that out. But that's what I learned about dealing with all the extraterrestrials. Some of them had really bad energy. I didn't want to be around them. I was afraid of them. I have learned to trust my gut reaction. But most of my experiences have been positive, and that's because I've been protected all my life. But I don't think my experience is unique. I think this is, once I start speaking, everybody starts speaking, and we start piecing this together, it's that 100th monkey thing. We're going to shift, and we're going to go to this new paradigm, and we're going to have this new reality. And we need it because the old one sucks. So let's brighten it up, Alfred.
Right. Now, yeah. So let me go back to various specifics that seem to weave their way through your life. Mm-hmm. One particular thing that seems to keep on coming up and up, and if you could talk more in specific about it, is the breeding programs.
Okay.
And it seems like you said, "Oh, I'm part of the breeding programs," and not a gray breeding program, but an Anunnaki.
Right.
What exactly do you mean by that? Could you get into it specifically?
Well, I realized with the research that there's this grave breeding program, but I've been told that I wasn't part of the grave breeding program. that because I'm on the bloodline, I remembered my past lives. I was doing a year of meditation where I met every week with a group, and then I meditated every night, same time every night for a year. And after about a year of doing this continuous practice, one night I got a download of my incarnations. Now, I came in remembering several incarnations, but this filled in, these are the relevant incarnations to this life and this now, and these are human incarnations. I had two back-to-back incarnations involving royalty that I recalled, and one was I was Henry VIII's fifth wife, and I had the whole experience. I started this nose thing going because I couldn't stand how Henry smelled. He had the gout. He stunk. I had an affair with his illegitimate son that my mistress or nanny had set up because I needed to get pregnant in order to produce an heir to the throne, and Henry was just not going to be able to do it. And I had the whole lifetime downloaded down to losing my head and everything involved with that. And I lived it. And it was this one night after a year of meditation. And then I went out of my body, and I was in between lives, and I came back as Elizabeth's the first illegitimate daughter. I have no proof that she had. This is just what I got this night. And Elizabeth hid me from court, brought me back when I was about 13. I started having a romance with Robert Dudley. Dudley was my father. She couldn't tell me. I had two children by Dudley. The children were not allowed to be raised at court, and I was so conflicted that I died of pneumonia. And on my deathbed, she brought Robert Dudley over, and he said, and she told him that, this is your father. And so as I died, I got the piece of that puzzle. And all this came back in a series of one night, and there was another connection with Jesus, and I'll hold that for another time. And I woke up, and I was in an altered state of consciousness. It's as if I had dropped 100 hits of acids, and I was not in 3D reality. I had a download of 4 or 5 incarnations, and of course I had to get up, go to work. I worked at Penn State University, and I went, to my friend Bud, I said, how am I going to act normal? And it didn't stop for like 2 weeks. And then finally I came down from it. I was able to act normal. So fast forward, I'm here in Hawaii. I have the internet here, right? And this guy, Dudley, his name is Dudley. And I said, Dudley, he was talking to me on the chats. These people just have come to me. I've had the Illuminati come to me many times. They start chatting to me, and they reveal who they are over time. And I don't think I can say everything because they might kill me, but I'll just tell you this one thing. And this guy Dudley, he said, we talked for about 2 years, and finally at the end of it, he said, I'm not the great great grandson of Robert Dudley. I am Dudley. And I told him, I said, I have a past life memory, and he said. Somehow I can't remember the exact conversation, but I was leading him to fill in the blanks because I like to do that. I don't want to give it all, but he was filling in the blanks. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know this past life story. I've never told anybody. And he said, and yes, Elizabeth had a daughter, and her name was Lady Thompson. And I go, you're kidding, Lady Thompson? And he says, yeah, I have a big portrait of her over my the fireplace here in the living room. And I said, well, Thompson's my maiden name. So it's very, very interesting, all these correlations.
Mm-hmm.
So
so but that means that you would have been, you're saying that you're a reincarnation of Anne Boleyn, who was Henry VIII's fifth wife?
Catherine Howard.
Catherine.
The young one that lost her, the one that lost her head. The fifth.
Oh, sixth. Okay.
Fifth.
Sixth.
Fifth one. No. 5.
Okay.
And Anna Cleves, I think, was the last one.
Right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah.
She only lived to be about 16, 17, 18. Yeah.
Catherine Howard.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Right.
Now,
so I have a past life memory of the bloodline,
and
a current life reference that my family's all Masons, and I got the, I'm all Celtic. I'm Scotch, Irish, Dutch, French, and English. I don't have any, I don't know. I could do the genealogy, but it seems like my family kept breeding in the same gene pool.
Yeah. So, do you have any earthly children? No.
No.
Do you have? So, when you were used for the breeding program, could you describe? Do you have any? Were you used as a womb or what?
I think they took my DNA. I think sometimes they implant it, but they took it out, and wherever they grow them somewhere else.
I see.
I was shown a son that I have with Sasha, and they showed me from an infant in my arms all up to he was a young man. They do that thing where they just show me my children at a certain age. They show me who they are through many phases of their lives, and so they're teaching me about, you don't have to be in this continuous timeline that we are all everything all at once. We are all of our ages all at once, right?
Right.
And then I had a friend of mine. We were in a UFO group over in Honolulu, and she just got it one day. She turned to me out of the blue. We're sitting there in the front row in an auditorium. She says, "You don't just have one or two children. You have a whole village." And I just looked at her and I said, "Yeah," because they're not limited. They can use our DNA and populate a planet. They're not limited.
Right. So, when you say the breeding program, are those offspring? Are they here on Earth? Are they in some part of the dimensional ecology in some space platform, on some other planet? Are they here on Earth?
It's just like the regular contactees that they're shown their children. Are they on board ship? Or is it another planet? I really don't know.
So you don't.
I don't think they're walking among us.
Yeah. So you don't have a larger picture of what the breeding program is and what function it is.
I'd say not at this time, except first of all, if it's Anunnaki, they were down to a couple thousand of them, maybe 10,000. They didn't have so they needed to start breeding in order to increase their population because they were dangerously low and depleted. So that's part of it, is that they needed more people. I go to Nibiru a lot. I call it Nibiru. I have these screen memories, so I don't jump back in my body. They're taking me astrally. So I'm on this planet, and they keep showing me, they start with incredible architecture, nothing like we have here. And there's areas where there's a lot of destruction. There's a town, a large city I go to. I know where I'm at now in the city. You know how you get to learn a city after you've been here for a while. Here's where they showed me the different areas. The architecture is mind-boggling. It's nothing like here, and everything's larger scale. So I'm saying, well, it's probably Nibiru because they were much more. They were much larger than we are, 8 to 12 feet tall. So different scale. And often I'm there in my same little human form. So I'm like a doll, like a toddler walking around this environment. So, and then I was taken to the council meeting. And this was within the last couple years. And I was bilocating. I've been having these bilocation experiences. I'm on board the ship or I'm on Nibiru, but I'm aware that I'm still lying in my bed and I'm in the jungle. My bedroom's right up against the jungle, and there's a stream outside my bed, and there's songbirds, and it's daylight, and I'm in this bed. And so when I went to the council meeting, there were 100,000. And what's going to ask, how many are here? 100,000 unique, distinct individuals. There were no two beings of the same species in this room, and this was a representation of all of 100,000 various bipedal opposing. These are bipedal opposing figures, thumb, some kind of system they can grasp, and the eyes in the front or within that range, right? And the only being species that duplicated were the three that were facilitating. It was like the United Nations of extraterrestrials. They were asking me, what was it like to be a 21st century human female Maui, and so I was reporting, and the three and they appear to be the best explanation is a boar, like a boar, BOAR. They weren't. That was you just do the best. Kind of like a cat, but it's not really a cat. And they were just in charge for that session only. The leadership rotates. I told them that they need too hard to endure, and it's too painful with how the society is, where people starving and diseases, and it's just enough. It's enough. We've been through this birth, life, death cycle over and over and over again, and it's enough. We've got our lesson. It's time for us to have some of the reality, maybe more like a Star Trekian, hopefully even better than that, because Star Trek was still a military-based system. Exploratory type paradigm where we're out, experiencing cosmos with the rest of the beings that are out there. And beyond this 3D level of war, I'm tired of the stories of war. Still on the 3D level, you're getting the Orions are fighting it's like so much war. Stop. I don't really believe that exists on a higher level. I think they're beyond that. They're way beyond peace. That's why that the quarantine's over. That intervention, they are going to intervene, and I believe it, but I don't know what's actually going on. Except I keep going to this planet, and they're still training me, and if I get sick, they're keeping good health, overweight, but I'm still pretty good. Does that make sense?
Yes. Your internet signal is going up and down, so
okay.
There's a bit of we lose a bit of what you're saying, but it seems like that quote, you're going to do something very important for humanity. It sounds like you're a multi-dimensional ambassador. Does that ring true?
Yes, and I'm not the only one. I get that there are others, and you may be one, but that was my turn to go to this meeting. Now, I told this to Grant Cameron and Steve Bassett, and they got some more insights into it. They thought that there was some kind, I don't know, I can't remember right now, but I'll have to ask them again what they got from that. I know they said it last year when I was at a conference with them. They thought that they might be bringing beings from all the different planets to this group and seeing, which species are able to move past this quarantine type level where they're unconscious and unaware and be initiated into the Federation. I don't know what the name of this organization. I call it the Federation because I was raised with Roddenberry and Star Trek. I was very involved with Star Trek. At 21, I went to the 20,000 person conference in New York City on my birthday again, my 21st birthday. My birthday's a big day.
Yeah. So today again is February 6th.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we have been at this for almost 2 hours.
Okay, we can quit.
Yeah. Now, what do you see in in this event that has just occurred today, as compared to all of the other birthdays, and as compared to do something very important for humanity. How do you see this communication, which is not only between us, but also to the audience members that will be listening and watching?
Uh-huh.
How do you feel that what do you feel about this event, it being part of your birthday and it being part of your life process of doing something important for humanity from a multi-dimensional point of view?
Well, first on a 3D level, I'm about to go to the UFO Congress, which right now is the largest gathering we have on an annual basis. It's in Scottsdale, Arizona, and there's going to be they've got a huge response this year, so we're doing a good work, and they expect at least 2,000, maybe 3,000 people through their doors. It's a 5-day event. And I wish you would be there because I'd like to see you again. But we're launching free, and that's going to free humanity. And I'm going to be there interviewing people. I go back into my 3D human level because each day I wake up, I go, where are the yeses and what can I do? You know, I live in this, so my perceived limitations. But I realize that there's going to be, like the Berlin Wall falling, the Emperor has no clothes, and the Wizard of Oz's curtain comes down. We're going to have this big aha day where it's a giant celebration, and we're going to be able to teleport and see each other for lunch and then go home to our places at night. And this is here. And I'm not getting, I know Ray says 2017, but I'm not settling for 2017. I don't know who's going to be here. We have 100,000 people a day are dying that would not die if we had our technology released that's out there. We have cures for all diseases. We have basically Dr. Aubrey de Grey and his team. We can basically have physical immortality. We finally get our birthright, which has been denied us, all of us, since the Anunnaki and before. And it's time we get our birthright. And I'm here, and I know I'm going to celebrate it. And Alfred, you and I we're going to give each other a hug, and all of us, we're going to celebrate this. And I demand it in 2015. I'm not waiting for this farce election in 2016 or Ray's 2017. I don't know who's going to be alive by then. I've lost how many friends last year? How many am I going to lose this year? And these are my friends, whether I met them or not. There's people that are our personalities, our celebrities, whatever. Every day we hear about people dying on Facebook. It's like, stop murdering us. You're murdering us. That's what I said. Stop murdering us. Stop allowing us to be murdered. Now, one of the things Dr. de Grey said is we have to deal with this thing about, well, we should die because we'll have overpopulation. No, we'll have the universe to explore and settle. And we won't be in this quarantine in this box. And so that's why I'm doing this. Wake up, come over, get interviewed, contact Alfred, get interviewed. Let's keep doing it. We're doing a good job. This is affecting, everything we do affects the morphogenic field. You could think, I can't do anything, I'm just a little person. No, everything we do goes into the field, and the speed of light comes back down, affects us, goes back up, affects it. We keep just gradually up-leveling, and the change will happen, and it'll be Berlin Wall Day down. Remember that day? It started in the morning, and it was down, and that had been like the major obstacle in my childhood. We heard about how these poor people were trapped behind the Berlin Wall. We thought we were free Americans, which is bullshit. So we're trapped behind this wall, which is another wall, which the powers be, the Illuminati, the Anunnaki, whoever you are, the Archons, just knock it off. It's game over. New paradigm. Does that make sense?
Yes. So how can people who want to become involved with you and join with you and with us in this process, how can they do that? How can they get in contact with your work?
Okay, Aquarian Radio, at gmail.com. Aquarius, it's the age of Aquarius. And we are here. It's aquarianradio at gmail.com. That's the best one. And look at my website. You can sign up to be interviewed. And I'm going to be at the free FREE, which is an acronym for something. I don't have it up, with Ray Hernandez and that organization. And we're gonna do little snippets of your experiences, whether it's lights in the skies or you've been abducted. We're gonna do 5-minute snippets, whatever you want to tell us about your experience. So come on over, sign up, and we'll get you on and that's all going to go out on this website. And this is the year. So if you want to organize a group in your town and hold meetups for people that are experiencers, do so. Let's get the facilitators, the therapists, whatever you need. I don't think we're going to all need therapy after a while. We're just going to need to look at each other and go, wow, that wasn't an illusion. That really happened. And the more we share at this UFO Congress, they have, I think, 6 experiencer meetings, maybe 7, every morning, every night. There's 80, 90 people there each session. Come on over and let's do it. Let's rock and roll. Make it happen. And contact Alfred. He's a good one. Maybe we could do some more experience or some more panels, discussion panels, you and me.
Right, right. What is the best website for people to go to get in touch with your work?
Right now, I put it all on aquarianradio.com. I'm also on Enki, ENKI Speaks, EnkiSpeaks.com. That's the 2 I'm working right now, putting everything up. I have extraterrestrialcontact.com. But I'd say I have very little time to do everything because I also manage an intentional community over here in Maui. And so I have a farm I'm running. Plus I'm writing 2 books and I do all my radio shows. Listen to Aquarian radio shows, comment on them. Listen to everything that Alfred does. He's right on the mark. Radio at gmail.com would be the best one. I have a personal, but that's one, it's so much junk now. I just want to switch it over to Aquarian Radio at Gmail. Yeah.
Good. Now, we're now entering 2015, which is the year that you would like everything to happen.
Yes.
What message would you like to leave us, all of us, the audience, with now?
That's a big one. You have it within yourself to accomplish this new paradigm, which honors all consciousness and allows us, each and every one of us, to live in dignity, beauty, grace, and with real, authentic peace, not peace that's artificially constructed by somebody that wants to control us, but real, authentic peace, and balancing our inner and outer, masculine and feminine. That's part of the problem. Is so start with your relationships, start having good relationships. If you don't know how to do it, get help, get therapy, learn communication skills. Your people in your lives, that's your mission, and start loving and appreciating everybody in your lives. And if they're sick or they have addictions, help them get help, because when you help those around you, you help yourselves, and giving and receiving are the same. So ultimately, the more you give, the more you get. And I think John Lennon said that, right? the love I give is equal to, how did
Beautiful. Well, good. We want to thank you very much for having given of your time today, and also having given this life of tremendous service at the multi-dimensional level, which just seems to be constant.
It's never a dull moment.
Yes, right.
Yes, and well, so, thank you so much, Alfred, for allowing me this time to come on your show. And and I've been chicken to do this ever since. But now today is my birthday, so whenever it's your birthday out there, do it too. Okay.
Good
Thank
good
you.
enough then.
Much love and blessing to you. Aloha, namaste.
Thank you.